Hello and welcome to the Pitt Mailbag Show from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're your hosts here, Chris Carter and Abby Schnable, your college writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of the content from all of our different sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com for all our written work. And as always, the Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast. Big shout out to our sponsors for this show, Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, there were 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local Pittsburgh area, and 8 of those local beers are available on tap. Located in the North Shore, right across the street from PNC Park. It's the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. Get there today. As I said, I'm joined with my partner in crime here, Abby Schnable, on the beat here. All right, Abby, let's get to taking some of these questions here. First of all, how was Mother's Day for you? Mother's Day is always a nice day to hang out. Did you get to talk to your mom at all or anything?
Oh, I talk to my mom every day. The best that I got a good story for you. You'll laugh at this.
Okay.
So as the oldest daughter, I have an older brother and a younger brother, and they both still live at home. My family lives in Missouri. I live in Pennsylvania. I send my mom a gift. She had been laying down hints. My little brother paid for the said gift. I ordered said gift, and then I get a text from my older brother, that says, "Hey, we did good on Mom's gift this year." And I said, "We? Who's we?" And he goes, "Mom said it was from me, you, and Brady." Brady's the younger brother.
Gotcha.
And I was like, "Well, Brady paid for it. I ordered it." And she doesn't like flowers in her office, but she wanted Lego flowers, so that's what we sent her. So he goes, "Fine, I'll help her build them, and that's my contribution."
Well, that's very cute.
But yeah, so I was like, "Oh, okay."
Absolutely. Mother's Day always special. Shout out to my mom, best mom in the world. Love you, Mom. But let's get into some questions here from the Pitt fans who have a lot of questions right now as recruiting season for Pitt football picks up, and we'll get to some of the newer commits. But we had Ron who first asked, who are the new transfer commits Pitt got over the weekend? In fact, Pitt got 2 over the weekend when they were going around. In fact, some of them coming around right around Mother's Day. One was Josh McCarty, a defensive back out of Eastern Michigan. Looks more like a special teamer than necessarily like a starting corner, but is going to provide them some veteran depth there. He's a graduate transfer. But the bigger name that I think everyone's looking at is Chief Borders, who played linebacker for Nebraska, coming off his redshirt sophomore season, had 9 tackles, didn't play a whole lot, did break up a pass, but is being brought to the Panthers there. He has 2 years of eligibility left. He's the interesting piece here. And my source tells me here, Abby, when asking around about Chief Borders, that he is being brought in not to play linebacker. He's going to be a defensive end for the team, and that potentially replaces one Deion Hayes. Maybe he is the athlete that they're looking for there. And he has sort of the build, 6'4", 245. So he's a bigger bodied guy here. Abby, what's your response to seeing Pat Narduzzi getting these 2 transfer commits over the weekend?
I'm excited about filling Deion Hayes' absence, the whole left behind that. I was a little confused at first about the move there. Obviously, anytime you bring someone from the Big Ten, I think that's a bonus, because whether you're the worst team in the Big Ten or the best team in the Big Ten, you're going head-to-head against arguably, if not probably second best league in the country in football, with Big Ten, probably right below SEC. So anyone with that experience is going to be able to come over and add a huge spark. And then the fact that he's coming over to kind of fill in that defensive end role is exciting. I'm a little nervous just because that's not what his background was at Nebraska, but at the same time, his that position is pretty fluid where he was at. So, it'll just be exciting to see what he's able to do. But I like that they were able to get someone from the Big Ten to come and fill this big hole that was left behind. And I also liked how Pat Narduzzi was a little cheeky with it on X.
He absolutely was, Abby. You are not lying. Listen, let me say this. Pat Narduzzi, he's a committed coach. He's a loyal coach. He is all about his program. But way back when Deion Hayes he entered the transfer portal. He made his announcement, and we wrote about the story here and what he said about Pitt on his way out. And then shortly after that, Solomon DeShields left, and that was the second starter from Pitt's defense. And Dayon Hayes posted 2 explosion emojis, like bang bang, as if like those are 2 explosions let off there. And Pat Narduzzi, shortly after Chief Borders announced his commitment to Pitt online, and he was the second commitment of that day. Pat Narduzzi did his own bang bang, and that's one of those things. Like I know Pat Narduzzi. I know that sometimes, like when he wants to make a point, he is so symbolic. He can get into those little minute things. He's a guy. This is a guy, Abby, who when they beat Clemson in 2021, when they were on their way to the ACC championship that year, when they beat Clemson and they knelt out the clock at the end, the next press conference when I remember talking to him, he brought up how the time before that they lost to Clemson, that they didn't kneel the clock out, that they kept trying to run up the score on Pitt, and he held on to that. This is also the same man who, after Pitt wins the backyard brawl against West Virginia with the pick six, and everyone's so happy and exciting, and he gets on national television to talk to Scott Van Pelt. He is talking to Scott about what ESPN said the percentage of West Virginia fans were. And I'm like, this man takes so many things personal, but I did think it was interesting, like you said, to see that post there and be like, I see what Pat Narduzzi's doing there.
It's so funny too, because like when you talk to him, like his humor is so almost sneaky and under the table. Like he comes across kind of like very level, flat, but then there's a moment like in certain press conferences, certain moments where he'll make a little joke or he'll make a little jab, but it's always like you have to be paying attention. It's not very like front forward facing of a joke. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, I love when the personality of a coach comes out a little bit, especially in a thing like that, because, you know, as a coach that probably, you know, losing Dayon Hayes and Solomon DeShields back to back, you know, had to have been frustrating.
Those are big hits. Those are big hits, especially because, you know, as we reported here at the Post-Gazette, you know, our sources indicated to us that Dayon Hayes was given a significant investment in NIL money to stick with Pitt, not just before then, but specifically after the season, is to convince him, hey, this program really believes in you. So when he left, you know, I can see that being a bit of a touchy subject there. So, but certainly, I think what you're going to see is with to answer Ron's question, you got a special teamer / depth in the secondary, and you'll have a guy that, you know, potentially could replace Hayes as a starter at defensive end. We were wondering what would happen at that position. We'll see where Chief Borders comes in the kind of hierarchy of the defensive ends when we get to see them in training camp. But let's move on to other questions here. Victor has a question. This one's about generally about the 2025 class, and that's actually been updated since we were preparing for this show, because as we were getting ready for this show, another commitment, 2 commitments have now come out. We're recording this show Monday mid to late afternoon a little bit, so there could actually also be some other commitments that happen by the time that this show gets published. But as it stands right now, there were 2 commitments. Now, I'll give y'all some game on how to tell what is what. When Pat Narduzzi has a commitment from a player, you'll see him do Pitt is it, and then there'll be hashtags. H2P is always a hashtag, but notice the different hashtags for different types of player. When it's a transfer, you'll often see we not me, and that'll be a sign that, like, hey, that's a transfer there. But if it's for the upcoming class, there's often a hashtag that it's a play on the numbers of the class. Like for the example, this year it's time to shine, but the to shine is 2 as in the number 2, and the S in shine is switched to a 5. So it's time to 5 high, but time to shine is the hashtag there. And that's a sign that, hey, these are class of 2025 commits. And by rule, Pat Narduzzi can't like say exactly who it is. He just has to let them announce it and all those types of things. But that is his way of deducing it. So as it stands, Abby, this is if those 2 are the only 2 other commitments that we have at this point, that adds on to Bryce Yates, Mason Heinstall, and Trevor Summers as 5 now commitments that Pitt has verbally for its class of 2025.
Yeah, that's a good spot to be in, I feel like, at this point of the year, you know, because these guys are they're finishing out their junior year of high school. You're getting ready for your senior year. And, you know, that's a good place for the players to be, just because there's less stress on your senior season. Obviously, you're still doing what you can to like make a run for championship, but less stress on the senior season. And I also like this for Pitt because it's showing like, with all of the craziness going 3-9 this past season and everything with the transfers, like it's good. It's a good sign from Pat Narduzzi that there's still players that want to come to Pitt. And there's still players that want to come to Pitt early. There's no reason these guys have to commit when they do. And they are, because they're dedicated to the team. And, you mentioned it earlier, Pat is a guy who's all about his guys, his team. And so to have these guys committing when they are, I think is a good sign for the program. I think it's a good sign for the future coming forward. And it's exciting to see as it starts to fill out, more and more as we get more commitments.
Absolutely. We'll keep you up to date with that as we start to learn who some of these younger commits are. But let's switch over to some basketball talk, because Samantha had a question, not about Pitt's upcoming team, but about players who have left Pitt and are now getting ready to try to make their professional careers. And this question comes about Blake Hinson. Samantha says, Blake Hinson had a good showing in a G League game. Will that get him drafted? Now, for clarity here, Blake Hinson played is part of the G League elite camp. He didn't get the official NBA combine invite, but he gets a chance to compete against other G League athletes, and he did do fairly well. He scored 18 points, shot 7 of 16 from the field, 2 of 9 from three-pointers. Wasn't great, but also brought in six rebounds, 2 assists, did have 4 turnovers. But Abby, you see those numbers for a G League player in this game. He was the leading scorer there. I think that's a decent showing. I don't know if that gets him drafted because he's not in the combine in the first place, but I do think it gets him a shot to at least get noticed and maybe, get a NBA signing to have a chance to get into the league.
Listen, I've seen a lot of players go into the G League camp or whatever, the official name is, and have not great numbers and get picked up. So I think this really does help Blake Hinson's stock overall in going pro within America. I don't necessarily think it's going to help him get drafted just because he's not going up against the cream of the crop. He's not going up against the other draft prospects. But I do really like that he took advantage of this. I mean, you mentioned 2 for 9 from 3-point range, but even more impressively, the 5 for 7 from 2. I think he really is taking the time to show his versatility. He's not just a 3-point guy. He can score inside. I got to watch a little bit of the highlights from it, and his finishes, it wasn't the same shot over and over again. And I think that's what a lot of NBA teams are looking for. Someone who is versatile offensively, but also can do some damage defensively. And that is Blake Hinson. And, I like this for him. Like I said, I don't really anticipate this helping him get drafted per se, but I definitely think it makes a lot of teams put them higher up on his list when it comes to maybe rookie camp or just the potential G League, a potential two-way contract.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another part of this is that oftentimes guys get to the league. People have to understand, those who are unfamiliar with the NBA draft, you have to be either the best of the best or have some insane professional traits, like have a great build and a lot of things going your way to get drafted in the NBA. Like it is not like the NFL. There are 2 rounds and teams are trying to get players that they think will translate very quickly. But with that, there's also a lot of chances after not getting drafted. Like, for example, we learned, when Justin Champagnie, who was Pitt's first men's all ACC first team player under Jeff Cable at all for the men's program. He was the first place to get that. He didn't get drafted, and people thought, what does this mean? And well, in the second round, Champagnie didn't want to be drafted. He wanted to go someplace that he thought would make him a priority in their minor league system, and bringing him up into the G League and getting him opportunities. And that led to him, getting with the Raptors. He worked through their G League, then he switched to the Celtics. He's done some more G League, and now he's with the Wizards. But he's on NBA rosters. He's a professional basketball player in the United States. That's kind of that's part of what you want. Another player who played at Pitt that went through a similar path is Mahamadou Gueye. Now, people might not remember Gueye, but he was a 1-year graduate transfer that came in, I think, the 2021-2022 season, right before Pitt started to take off. But he was like, a really good, transfer addition for them that really helped out as a bigger option, 6'9", skinny guy who could shoot the 3-pointer. But he came in, signed G League with the Mavericks, played for their Texas Legends, and then eventually came up. Now he's on the Raptors roster. And so, and in fact, there was a really cool moment where he was on the bench for the Raptors and Champagnie was on the bench for the Wizards for a game, and they got to take a picture together. And I thought it's things like that get you your leg into the NBA and earning your spot as a role player. Yeah, none of these guys are going to be like Cameron Johnson the way that he's in the NBA. That's a whole different ballgame. And that's what Bub Carrington is trying to be. But these two guys is veteran, and I think they are an example of what Blake Hinson could be. And I also think Blake Hinson, with his scoring ability, he could also provide. He could work his way up a little bit faster if he's able to show in these G League games that he is one of the best offensive threats of all these prospects.
That's what I like about Blake Hinson is I feel like his offensive versatility translates so well to NBA. You see a lot of players that don't necessarily like jump off the page as an NBA player, but Blake Hinson, to me at least, and I watch a lot of college basketball, Blake Hinson to me is the kind of guy who looks to me like, yeah, he would do well.
Yeah.
The thing with Blake is his numbers don't jump off the page. So he has to work at it a little bit more. But when he gets that opportunity, he's going to take advantage of it. And we saw that in his first G League camp game. And I just think teams are overlooking him if they don't have him on their list, especially as a G League player, just because he's so good at what he does. He's so versatile. He's able to play both sides. And there are a lot of players that I can say in this draft pool this year that I don't think are as versatile as a Blake Hinson. And I think that's just another advantage for him.
Absolutely. We got one more question here, and this is more of a broader question from Charles, and this is also some very new information. Like, we came up also while we were going over options for questions for this show, and Charles asks, some of the higher ups at some higher up at UNC has mentioned that the university needs to find a higher revenue league. Is the ACC on its last legs? Now, for just to catch people up here, UNC, of course, the University of North Carolina, major basketball program, has brought in some big football names over the past few years. But they haven't sued. They're not like Clemson and Florida State, who have gone to court with the ACC. But this is another sign that the ACC itself as a league is in a rough spot that it's in, and saying it needs to find a higher revenue league. This is part of the problem that the ACC has with its current contract as far as its television, because it's not pulling in the money that the SEC and the Big Ten are, and programs are starting to are seeing like, hey, we can get higher profits if we go to one of these leagues. And the contract that they're in right now with their TV deal, it's going to keep them tied up for a bit with that. And that's something that some of these bigger universities that can write their own ticket, that they don't necessarily need a conference to promote them. Conferences will want them, like North Carolina, especially because of their basketball program. It could put the ACC in a really hard position that makes them the next Pac-12 of the major conferences remaining.
And the scary part for me as a huge college basketball fan lover is if North Carolina like the ACC is very well respected with college basketball. You got Duke, you've got UNC, you've got Pitt, who's been jumping in, Miami. Like, there's so many schools that are like really good at college basketball. And I know everything's going to football, and that's what a lot of these contracts are leaning towards. That's why the Big Ten has expanded. That's why we've seen Texas and Oklahoma leave. And so maybe that's the problem. And as a college basketball lover, it makes me a little bit sad, because I love how the ACC is very focused on college basketball, almost like the Big East. Like, the Big East is purely basketball, whereas I wonder if that's kind of the trajectory the ACC is going a little bit. And that's problematic if you get a school like UNC leaving, because one of the reasons the ACC is so widely regarded as one of the best basketball conferences is because of UNC and because of Duke. And it just starts this domino effect. And I don't know, the conference realignment thing is constant conversation, because what happens when all of these schools leave and then all of a sudden there's like 25 teams in a league? Like, what's the point of even having a conference when you're at that point? Like, it's very convoluted and very confusing. And I don't necessarily think the ACC's on its last legs, mostly because of how binding that contract that they're all in is.
Mm-hmm.
But it does make me wonder, how much is this going to leave a bad taste in the school's mouths when that contract is up and they are able to start looking at other opportunities.
No, absolutely. It's a great point. Like you said, the contracts that they're in, it's pretty binding. It's why they're suing, because they kind of just can't do anything about it. And they're just kind of like, we want more money. And we know, like, Clemson and Florida State knows that, like, if they went up to the highest bidder, the SEC and the Big Ten would get into a bidding war over them, and they would absolutely love that, because they'd get better TV deals. But you know, they're stuck there, and the ACC is going to hold on to this. I'm not sure what the ACC. I'm no expert in how revenue gets built in major conferences. If I did, I wouldn't be a journalist. I'd probably be working in that field somewhere and making a lot more money. But I do think that that's part of the challenge the ACC is. The ACC has to find a way to make up that revenue, has to find a way to do this. And like you said, the ACC is respected on the level of being a basketball conference, but at the same time, they're getting dogged as a basketball conference. I did the whole story about how, of all the major conferences, they're given the fourth highest amount of bids, despite having the best by far tournament production year in and year out. And the rules that are set for other conferences, where in every other major six conference in college basketball right now, over the past 5 tournaments, every other conference, if you got 22 wins, you're in. But in the ACC, you need 24 wins to get in. Mm-hmm. And it's a different standard there. And then, the way that things play out, Florida State, being in the ACC, being undefeated and winning their conference championship, they became the first team in all of college football during the college football playoffs to get that, and then not get an invite to the college football playoffs. And I think that also leaves a sour taste in their mouth, not at the fault of the ACC commissioner Jim Phillips or anything, but just an acknowledgement, like, the ACC it doesn't get its respect anywhere. And so those major programs that like, hey, if Florida State does that in the Big Ten, they're in the national championship conversation. They're getting into the playoffs. But because it was in the ACC, not as much. And I think the odd position here too, Abby, when we're talking about the SEC and the Big Ten, the Big 12 has a leg up on the ACC, but I don't think their leg up is as big as some Big 12 fans believe it to be. If anything, I think that the ACC and the Big 12 need to do what they can to help each other stay alive. Because if, let's say, sometime in the next 10 years or so, however long it is, the ACC does fold and crumble, who do you think is going right after that? The Big 12 would be right behind them, and then it would just be down to 2 major conferences. And like you said, the realignment would be crazy. And here's the other part of this. A lot of these programs, and I think Pitt falls into this category, they would be scrambling to be part of one of these major conferences. And if they're left out in the wind, who knows what that could do for college football, college basketball, and revenue for a lot of these sports programs.
Everyone says the transfer portal is the wild, wild west. I think college sports in general right now are the wild, wild west, with transfer portal and NIL and conference realignment. It feels like there's another new thing jumping out every single day. And it's just like, can we get some regulation on any of this, please? And thank you, because it's chaotic. It's chaotic for us reporting on it. So I have to imagine it's chaotic for the coaches and the ADs and all the way up the ladder. And it's just like, man, can we get a breather for 1 second, please?
It would certainly be nice. And you're right, as reporters, it would be a lot easier to keep track of, other than having to just check literally every second of every day for the next big update that is happening in college sports. But those are your questions. Thank you to Charles, Samantha, Victor, and Ron for all their questions and submitting to us here at the Pitt Mailbag Show from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. She's Abby Schnable. I'm Chris Carter. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Pitt Mailbag Show. As always, you can find all of our written content at post-gazette.com. You can find this show and all of our daily shows that come out from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by searching Post-Gazette Sports into any of your podcasting apps, or on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all the daily content that comes out here. Back tomorrow with a North Shore Drive podcast episode, keeping you up to date with all things here Pittsburgh sports. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you again soon right here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.